On a quiet Texas evening, just as the sky turned copper and the last cicadas buzzed against the fading heat, Daniel Harper heard a diesel engine slow roll toward his front gate, an engine he didn't recognize. Out here, miles from the nearest highway, nobody just showed up, and certainly not at that hour. But what stepped out of the trailer was even stranger. A finely bred jumping mare worth more than his entire herd, delivered to a cattle ranch that didn't even own a saddle suitable for her. And the way she looked back, ears pinned, chest heaving, trembling like she'd outrun hell itself, Daniel realized something instantly. This wasn't a delivery. It was an escape. Before we dive deeper into this mystery, if you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps bring more people into ese tipo de narrativa. By the way, where are you tuning in from? The dust settled around the long silver trailer as Daniel wiped his hands on his jeans and walked toward the gate. He had been fixing a broken water line all afternoon, still wearing work gloves, still smelling of PVC glue and dirt. Nothing about his day had prepared him for this. "Evening," the driver called, hopping down from the truck. He was young, maybe late 20s, with sunburned cheeks and the weary look of someone who had been on the road too long. Daniel nodded back. "You lost, friend?" "No, sir." "Delivery for a Daniel Harper?" The driver checked the clipboard. "Well, that's me," Daniel said cautiously. "But I didn't buy anything." The driver's brows knitted. "This is 1847 County Road 12, right?" "Yeah." "Then she's yours, at least according to the paperwork." The mare stamped the ground, tossing her head. Her coat, a deep mahogany bay, shimmered even under dust and sweat. She was unmistakably a show horse, lean, muscled, legs wrapped in expensive shipping bandages, and wearing a European-made halter. Nothing about her belonged in a cattle ranch. Daniel walked closer, and the mare stepped backward, nostrils flaring. She wasn't just nervous, she was scared. "What's her name?" Daniel asked. The driver checked again. "Says here, Esmeralda, but folks call her Essie." Daniel let out a low whistle. "She's a long way from any show barn." The driver blew out a breath. "Tell me about it. Picked her up from a holding facility outside Houston. No owner present. Paid in cash. Delivery address in the system was this ranch, so here I am." Daniel raised a hand to the mare's neck, slow and gentle the way his father taught him. Essie didn't move, but she didn't relax either. "You try loading her back up?" Daniel asked. The driver nodded. "Twice. She damn near kicked through the ramp. Don't know what's gotten into her." Daniel did. He had seen animals frightened for their lives before. Not horses, cattle, the kind that sensed coyotes nearby or a storm rolling in. But this was different. Essie wasn't looking around for danger. She was looking behind her, like something was following. "Look," the driver said, scratching his head. "I can call dispatch. Maybe they screwed up." But the mare jerked suddenly, pulling the rope so hard the driver lost it. She bolted, not away, but toward Daniel. She stopped just shy of him, pressed her trembling shoulder into his chest, her breath fast and frantic. The driver blinked. "Well, she picked you." Daniel's instincts pricked. Something here was wrong, but he couldn't fix it tonight. "Fine," he sighed. "Leave her. I'll sort it out in the morning." He signed the delivery receipt reluctantly. The truck roared back to life, taillights disappearing down the dirt road as the first stars pricked through the sky. When everything went quiet again, Daniel finally looked down at the mare leaning against him. "You got no business being here," he murmured, but she only shivered harder. The Daniel guided Essie slowly toward the old cattle barn. The wooden boards creaked beneath her hooves, but she followed him, reluctantly, like every step felt like something might jump out at her. He used the only stall with a gate tall enough to hold a sport horse. He laid down clean hay, filled a bucket with cool well water, and turned on the dim bulb above. When he removed her shipping boots, he saw it. Fresh cuts along her fetlocks, small but jagged, like she'd scraped herself on metal fencing or sharp road debris. Strange for a horse supposedly transported professionally. Daniel frowned. "What have they put you through, girl?" As he brushed her down, dust flaked off in patches. Beneath her glossy coat, Essie's muscles twitched at every sound. When Daniel unbuckled her saddle pad, far too fine for ranch use, something small slid free and clinked softly onto the floor. A metal capsule, not bigger than his thumb, tied beneath a leather flap. He picked it up, lightweight, sealed tight. "What in the hell?" He twisted the cap open. Inside was a scrap of folded paper, thin, torn around the edges, like it had been ripped from something official. He unraveled it slowly. Coordinates, a date, and 2 words written in rushed handwriting. Daniel's chest tightened. There were no names, no explanation, nothing to tie this message to a person or place. But the paper looked recent, ink still crisp, edges still clean. Someone hid this on purpose. Someone who didn't expect the mare to be found, and someone who thought a warning was necessary. And the barn door rattled softly in the wind, and Essie flinched again. Daniel sighed, grabbing an old blanket and draping it over her back. "You'll be safe here tonight," he said quietly. But even as he spoke, he didn't believe it. Somewhere out there, someone had lost a high-value animal, and nobody misplaces a $145,000 jumping mare by accident. If Essie had run, if someone let her run, or if someone wanted her gone, Daniel suddenly felt like the dark fields around his ranch weren't as empty as they looked. He locked the barn door, checked it twice, and for the first time in years, he slept lightly, because something had arrived on his property that didn't belong there, and something, or someone, might come looking for it. The old ceiling fan in Daniel's bedroom clicked with every rotation, chopping the silence into uneven pieces. He lay on his back, staring at the water stain that spread like a brown map across the plaster, listening for sounds he had never paid attention to before. Coyotes yipped somewhere far off. A truck changed gears on the distant highway. Wind brushed the tin roof, making it creak, and underneath it all he swore he could still hear the mare's quick, nervous breathing. Around 2 a.m., he gave up on sleep. The coordinates wouldn't leave his mind. Numbers, like a splinter under the skin. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, pulled on his jeans and padded barefoot down the hallway. The house smelled faintly of coffee from earlier, and old wood warmed by the day's heat. On the dining table sat his beat-up laptop, screen smudged and casing cracked at one corner. He flipped it open, the fan whirring louder than the ceiling fan had. It took its time waking up, just like everything else in that house. He typed the numbers from the paper slowly, double-checking each digit. Then he plugged them into the map. The screen flickered, loading, then zoomed in. Not a city, not a show barn. A patch of land outside of Austin, quiet roads, a few scattered properties, a creek running through. He zoomed closer. A facility popped up. Silver Creek Equestrian Center. Daniel leaned back in his chair. He'd heard of it. Anyone in Texas who'd been within earshot of the horse community had. It was one of those high-end places. Imported warm bloods, riders with sponsors stitched across their jackets, trainers with reputations that stretched beyond state lines. But he'd never had a reason to go near it. "What business do you have with them, Essie?" he muttered. He tapped on satellite view. From above, Silver Creek spread out like a small, expensive village. Show arenas, pristine paddocks, white-fenced pastures. Clean, organized, polished. Not the kind of place you imagined a terrified, injured mare fleeing from. Then his eyes drifted back to the paper beside the laptop. The date. 2 days ago. The warning, "Do not trust him." He ran a thumb over the ink, feeling the slight indentation the pen had left in the fibers. Him who? A trainer? An owner? Someone at Silver Creek? Or someone who used to be there? The floorboard under the kitchen window popped softly. Daniel's head snapped up. He turned off the laptop screen out of habit, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. The only light came from the digital clock on the stove, glowing green. 2:13 a.m. Another sound, this time from outside. Not the wind. A faint crunch, like weight on gravel. He moved silently to the window, lifting one corner of the curtain just enough to peek through. The yard lay still, bathed in pale moonlight. The driveway, the old pickup, the wire fences, all there, all ordinary. Nothing moved, but his skin prickled anyway. "Get a grip," he whispered to himself. He grabbed the flashlight from the counter and stepped onto the back porch. The boards groaned under his weight. The air was cooler now, carrying the smell of mesquite and barn dust. He clicked on the light, the beam cutting a narrow line through the dark as he walked toward the barn. Halfway there, he stopped. There were tracks that hadn't been there earlier. Not Essie's, not his. Tire marks, fresh and shallow, had curved off the main driveway, stopped near the fence line, then reversed back out. Someone had pulled up during the night, close enough to see the barn, close enough to see the mare if the doors had been open. Daniel's jaw tightened. He followed the tire marks with the flashlight, tracing them until they vanished back onto the main road. No sign of someone on foot. No gate left open. Whoever had come hadn't tried to enter, at least not from this side. He forced his feet to keep moving. When he reached the barn, Essie's sharp whinny cut through the air, even before he slid the door open. "Easy, girl. It's just me," he said softly. The mare was at the front of the stall, head high, eyes wide, sweat darkening her coat along the neck despite the cooler air. She stared past him, toward the shadows outside. "Did you hear 'em too?" Daniel asked. He stepped into the stall, letting her sniff his arm. Her breath was still quick, hot against his skin. He checked her legs again. No new injuries. As he smoothed a hand down her side, he felt the tension in her muscles, coiled tight like wire. "I'm starting to think you didn't come here by accident," he murmured. He stayed with her longer than he meant to, just standing there as she gradually calmed, chewing a mouthful of hay, ears still flicking at every noise. When he finally walked back to the house, birds were already starting to stir in the trees. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. Those two mat to queue out by 7. The Texas sun was already warming the fields, turning the grass gold. The cattle moved slowly through the pasture, lowing lazily. The normalcy of it all pissed him off a little. Inside, Daniel poured coffee into a chipped white mug and stared at the phone on the counter. Logically, the thing to do was simple. Call the sheriff, report an incorrectly delivered horse, explain the weird note, let someone else deal with it. But logic had never met the reality of living rural with limited backup and plenty of folks who liked to handle their business quietly. The Mare was expensive. That meant lawyers, insurance, ownership disputes. If there was something criminal behind her arrival, there might be people who preferred she disappear quietly. He thought of the tire marks from the night before. Someone might already know exactly where she was. He reached for the phone anyway. His thumb hovered over the contact labeled Sheriff Lane. Then he slid to another contact instead. Rachel, vet. He hit call. The line rang twice before a bright, tired voice answered. "This is Dr. Maddox." "Rachel, it's Daniel Harper." "Well, good morning, stranger. You only call me when something's bleeding or about to calve. Which is it this time?" He hesitated. "Neither. I got a horse problem." "You don't own horses." "I do now, apparently." A pause on the line, then a skeptical laugh. "You want to try that again?" "It's a long story," he said. "Can you swing by today? I'll tell you when you get here. I need you to look at her. She's on edge. And she's not just some backyard mare. She's fancy, jumping type." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "All right, I'll finish up at the miller's place and head your way. Couple hours? Appreciate it." He hung up, set the phone down, and took a long drink of coffee. As he stepped back onto the porch, a pickup truck slowed on the road in front of his property. Not Rachel's, wrong color, wrong shape. A white Ford, windows tinted just a little darker than usual. It didn't stop, but it crawled past his gate slowly enough that Daniel could feel eyes on his house. He watched it until it disappeared over the small rise in the road. He finished his coffee cold. First, while he waited for Rachel, he cleaned stalls, fixed a loose hinge, and checked the fences on the south pasture. He tried to keep busy, but his mind kept circling back to that folded paper and those coordinates. Once, years ago, he had thought his life might look a little more like Silver Creek's world, back when he still did braking and training for hire before the drought and his dad's hospital bills and the slow grind of debt. Back when he still believed he could make something bigger out of the ranch. A bad deal with a horse trader had soured him on that dream. Papers forged, money never fully paid. The sheriff had shrugged. Civil matter, not criminal. Daniel had eaten the loss and gone back to cattle. Less glamour, more predictability. Maybe that was why this whole situation rubbed him wrong. He recognized the smell of someone trying to use an animal to hide a bigger problem. When Rachel's blue vet truck finally turned onto his drive, he felt a knot in his chest loosen just a bit. If there was one person he trusted around here, it was her. She hopped down, ponytail already frizzing in the heat, vet bag in hand. "Where's this mystery horse?" she asked, squinting toward the barn. "In here," Daniel said, leading the way. When Rachel saw Essie, she actually stopped. "Okay," she muttered. "You weren't kidding. That is not a ranch pony." Essie watched them both, ears flicking, body tensed. Rachel approached with effortless calm, letting the mare catch her scent, touch her hand with a soft muzzle. Her practiced eye scanned Essie from ears to hooves. "She's high-end," Rachel said. "Warm blood, most likely. European import, if I had to guess." And stressed out of her mind. She ran practiced hands along Essie's neck and shoulders, checking joints, lifting hooves, inspecting the small cuts. "These aren't from neglect," she said. "Looks like she's been traveling rough. Maybe panicked in the trailer, maybe kicked at something. Whoever hauled her didn't have their act together." Daniel leaned against the stall door. "She came in on a commercial rig. Driver said he picked her up outside Houston. No owner. Paid in cash." Rachel's brows rose. That's not how people usually move horses like this. Got paperwork? She asked. He handed her the delivery receipt. Then, after a second of hesitation, he handed her the small metal capsule and the note that had been hidden in Essie's tack. Her expression changed the moment she read it. "Do not trust him," she read aloud softly. "That's vague as hell. Coordinates lead to Silver Creek Equestrian," Daniel said. "You know it?" Rachel nodded slowly. "Yeah, couple of my clients board there. Big money, big egos. You know anyone there I shouldn't trust?" he asked. She gave him a look. "In that crowd? I can think of several." She folded the note carefully. "Daniel, this feels bad, like someone's either trying to keep this mare away from a specific person or using her as leverage. Either way, she landed on my doorstep," he said, "and someone drove by in the middle of the night, left fresh tire marks near the barn. Another truck crawled by this morning, real slow." Rachel exhaled. "You talked to Lane yet?" "Not yet. You need to," she said firmly. "Sooner rather than later. If this mare is tied up in something ugly, you don't want to be the guy who sat on evidence." He knew she was right, but looking at Essie, her eyes finally softening as she chewed hay, her muscles loosening just slightly now that someone competent had handled her, he also knew something else. If he made the wrong call, she might end up right back wherever she had tried to escape from. Rachel slung her stethoscope around her neck. "For now, she's stable. I'll leave you some calming paste and antibiotics for those cuts, just in case. Physically, she'll be fine." She paused, meeting his eyes. "It's the people around her I'm worried about." Daniel watched Rachel's truck disappear down the dirt road, dust rising behind her in a long, pale ribbon. The moment she turned the corner, the ranch fell silent again. Too silent. Essie shifted inside the barn, letting out a low, uneasy snort. He felt it too, the presence of something unsaid settling over the property, heavy like the humidity before a storm. He pulled the metal capsule out of his pocket and rolled it between his fingers. Tiny, simple, easy to overlook. Yet inside sat a message someone thought important enough to hide on a $145,000 mare. Do not trust him. The question was no longer what the mare was fleeing from. It was who, and why the hell the trail of that danger led straight to his doorstep. Daniel wasn't a man who liked guessing games, especially not when animals were involved, so there were only two choices: call Sheriff Lane and make this somebody else's problem, or track down the coordinates himself. He set the capsule on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long moment. The morning sun poured through the window, lighting up motes of dust dancing above old wood. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Yeah," he muttered, "I already know which one I'm picking." 2 hours later, Daniel's truck hummed down the farm-to-market road, its tires humming over sun-baked asphalt. There were no clouds, just wide Texas sky and the long, flat promise of trouble up ahead. Silver Creek was nearly 40 miles away. He knew the back roads well enough. He'd hauled cattle near there years back, but he'd never had a reason to step onto their fancy property. He felt out of place already, and he wasn't even there yet. On the passenger seat lay Dune, the note, the coordinates scribbled on a notepad, and a photo Rachel had taken of Essie's injuries, just in case someone decided to deny everything. Daniel didn't come to pick a fight, but he damn sure wasn't going to be intimidated. When the sign finally appeared, Silver Creek Equestrian Center carved into white stone, he slowed. The entrance was lined with immaculate live oaks, branches twisting overhead into a manicured tunnel. Beyond the trees, the facility unfolded in precise symmetry. White fencing, domed arena roofs, pristine barns painted in elegant gray, riders walking polished geldings, and the subtle hum of wealth. Daniel parked near the visitor lot, next to a row of pristine SUVs. His pickup looked like it had been dragged out of another lifetime, and in a way it had. He stepped out, boots crunching on the clean gravel. A stable hand, probably 19 at most, glanced at him before doing a double take. Ranch folks didn't wander in here often. Daniel tipped his hat politely. "Morning." Morning, sir," the kid said, shifting his weight. "I'm looking for whoever manages this place." "That'd be Mr. Caldwell," the kid said. "He's in his office near Barn A. I can show you." "Appreciate it." The Barn A looked more like a luxury car showroom than a stable. Steel and glass, air conditioning vents, no dirt, no sweat, no animal smell, just money. The kid gestured toward a glass-paneled office. "He's in there." Inside, a man in his mid-50s sat behind a desk big enough to land a helicopter on. Crisp, button down. Rolex. Papers neatly arranged like he didn't actually need any of them. He looked up with a polished smile. "Can I help you?" Caldwell asked. Daniel stepped inside and shut the door behind him. "I think you can," he said. "Name's Daniel Harper. I run a cattle ranch east of here." Caldwell's eyes flicked over Daniel's worn boots, his dust-coated shirt, and the calloused hand he extended. Caldwell shook it lightly, the way someone shakes a hand they don't want to fully touch. "And what brings a cattleman to an equestrian center?" Caldwell asked. Daniel dropped a photo of Essie on the desk. Caldwell's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. A flicker, almost too quick to catch. "This mare was delivered to my ranch yesterday," Daniel said. "Wrong address, wrong everything." Caldwell leaned back slowly. "You received her. That must have been startling. That's one word for it." Daniel dropped the second item, the metal capsule. Caldwell raised a brow. "What's this?" "You tell me." Caldwell opened it, unfolded the note. His eyes moved across the words. His jaw tightened. Barely, but Daniel saw it. He folded the paper again, slower this time. "Where did you find this?" "Tied to her tack." The room went quiet. "Mr. Caldwell?" Daniel said, voice low. "Something scared that mare bad enough she wouldn't load back on the trailer. Someone hid that message, and those coordinates lead here." Caldwell clasped his hands together. "And why come to me, Mr. Harper?" "Because someone wrote, 'Do not trust him,' not 'do not trust them.' Singular. Flows back to a person, and this facility is the only connection she's got right now." Caldwell smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "I can assure you, Mr. Harper," he said smoothly, "our horses are treated with utmost care. If something unfortunate happened to this mare, it did not occur here." Daniel held his gaze. "Then who does the note refer to?" "I have no idea." A lie. Daniel felt it before the words even finished leaving Caldwell's mouth. "And yet," Caldwell continued, "I would very much like her returned. She's the property of one of our clients." "Name?" "I can't disclose that." Daniel crossed his arms. "She isn't leaving my ranch until I know she's going somewhere safe." Caldwell's smile tightened. "That's not your decision to make." "Seems like it is," Daniel said. "She showed up scared, cut up, and alone." Caldwell exhaled through his nose. "Mr. Harper, you're interfering with property that doesn't belong to you." "And someone drove past my ranch in the middle of the night," Daniel said, "looking for her." Caldwell's eyes flickered again. He stood. "Mr. Harper," he said quietly, "you've made a mistake. I strongly advise you return her immediately." Daniel stepped closer to the desk. "And I strongly advise you tell me who him is." A beat of silence. Caldwell's jaw worked, and for a moment Daniel thought he might break, but then, "I think this conversation is over." Daniel stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked out. He didn't slam the door. He didn't have to. The tension in the room slammed it for him. Teostihuacon back outside, the air felt heavier, not the weather, something else. He walked toward his truck. Halfway there, he noticed a man leaning against a black SUV 2 rows over, mid-40s, trim, dark sunglasses, watching him, not watching the barn, not watching the riders, watching him. Daniel slowed. The man didn't move, not even a change in posture, just cool, steady observation. The kind of man who'd been staring at people professionally his whole life. Daniel pretended not to see him, climbed into his truck, started the engine. But the moment he pulled out of the parking lot, the SUV's headlights flicked on, and it followed. Not in a rush, not hiding, steady, measured, inevitable. Daniel gripped the wheel tighter. If the note warned him not to trust someone from Silver Creek, he was pretty sure he'd just met at least 2 candidates. The black SUV followed Daniel for the first 7 miles without a hint of hesitation. Not too close, not too far. Just close enough to say, "We see you. We know where you're going." Daniel kept his eyes on the rearview mirror, counting mile markers, measuring behavior. Whoever was driving wasn't sloppy or impulsive. This was a professional shadow, someone trained to observe without escalating, and that worried him more than if the driver had tried to run him off the road. At mile 8, Daniel took a sharp right onto County Road 214. A narrow, cracked strip of asphalt barely wide enough for 2 vehicles. Ranch country. Mesquite trees thick on both sides. If the SUV followed here, it meant intention. The SUV followed. Daniel muttered a curse under his breath. He eased off the gas and pulled over onto the dirt shoulder. Dust rolled up around his tires. He left the truck running, then stepped out, planting his boots firmly on the gravel. He didn't raise his hands, didn't posture. He simply waited. The SUV rolled to a stop 30 yards behind him. Engine idling, windows still tinted. Daniel called out, voice steady. "You want to talk? Let's talk." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, mid-40s, clean-shaven, wearing a crisp dark jacket despite the heat. His posture was military, his walk precise, no wasted motion. He stopped 10 feet away. "Mr. Harper," the man said, voice calm, "you're a difficult individual to get a hold of." "I ain't trying to be got a hold of," Daniel replied, a faint smile. "I can see that. Who the hell are you?" The man slipped one hand into his jacket, not threatening, just measured, and pulled out a wallet. He opened it briefly, enough for Daniel to see a badge and an ID card. "Name's Marcus Lane," he said. "Private investigator." Daniel looked hard at the badge. It wasn't fake. It also wasn't from any government office. Private sector, high-end. "Who hired you?" "I can't disclose that." Daniel stared at him. "Then we're done here." He turned to walk back to the truck, but Marcus's voice stopped him. "It's about the Mare, Mr. Harper." Daniel froze. Marcus took one small step closer. "Her name is Esmeralda. She belongs to a client of mine who's very concerned about her safety." "Funny," Daniel said without turning around. "She didn't look real safe last night." "That's complicated." Daniel faced him fully now. "Everything about this is complicated." Marcus studied him. "My client simply wants the horse retrieved. They have the paperwork, the resources, and the legal ownership." "Then why wasn't your client at the delivery?" Daniel asked. "Why was she dropped off at the wrong ranch with a note warning someone not to trust him?" Marcus didn't flinch, but he didn't answer either. Daniel stepped closer. "Your client got a name?" "No." "What about the him in the note?" Marcus paused. "Mr. Harper, returning the Mare is the smartest." "That ain't an answer." Marcus's jaw tightened. "We don't want this to escalate," Marcus said. "Just tell me when we can collect her." Daniel crossed his arms. "Not until I know she's not going back to the person she's terrified of." "Her fear is being misunderstood," Marcus said carefully. "Those cuts on her legs misunderstood too." Marcus exhaled slowly. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be." Daniel nodded. "Good. I'd hate for it to be easy." For the first time, Marcus's controlled facade cracked, just slightly. He slipped his badge back into his jacket. "I need you to listen carefully, Mr. Harper," he said. "There are people involved in this who don't appreciate delays. You keeping that Mare is putting a target on yourself." "Already saw a truck crawling past my place this morning," Daniel said. "Target's already there." Marcus blinked. His silence confirmed that he already knew. "Tell your client they don't get her," Daniel said firmly. "Not until someone explains why a 6-figure Mare is hiding from them." Marcus stepped forward, voice quiet and even. "You're stepping into something much larger than you think. Then maybe y'all should have left me out of it." The road went silent except for the low hum of the truck's engine and the rustling of mesquite branches in the breeze. Finally, Marcus nodded once. "I'll report back," he said. "But Mr. Harper, be careful who you trust." He got back into the SUV and drove away, not fast, not slow, just steady. Daniel waited until the vehicle disappeared completely before getting back into his truck. His hands were trembling, not from fear, from anger. By the time he reached the front gate, heat shimmered across the fields. A hawk circled overhead. Everything looked normal, but the normal felt fragile, like one wrong move might fracture it. As he parked, Essie whinnied from inside the barn. It surprised him how quickly that sound steadied him. He walked inside, and Essie lifted her head, ears swiveling toward him. Her eyes were clearer today, still wary, but not the wild, haunted look from before. Daniel leaned against the stall door. "Looks like you got more people looking for you than I thought," he said softly. Essie stretched her neck forward, nose brushing his sleeve. She was choosing him, he realized, not out of convenience, out of trust, and that trust felt heavy on his chest. "You picked the wrong rancher to dump a mess on," he murmured, "because I ain't giving you up until I know the truth." He fed Essie, checked her bandages, and scrubbed dried mud from her flank. Each touch revealed something new, tightness in her muscles, the kind of soreness that came from panic, not work. She'd been running, hard, for hours. Something had chased her long before she ever reached the delivery truck. When he finished, he went back to the house and pulled up his laptop again. If Silver Creek wasn't talking, he'd dig himself. He typed in the facility's borders, press releases, competition rosters, donors. One name appeared over and over, Caleb Windsor, owner, investor, competitive jumper, a man with money, influence, and more connections than a spiderweb, but that wasn't what made Daniel's stomach drop. It was a news article from last month. Caleb Windsor under inquiry for alleged mistreatment of competition horse. The case had been dismissed. Lack of evidence. Non-cooperative witnesses. But Essie's injuries, her panic, her attempt to flee, they suddenly made a whole lot more sense. Daniel pushed back from the table. Was Caleb the him the note warned about? The coincidence was too sharp to ignore, and just as that thought formed, gravel crunched outside. Not a drive-by. Not slow watching. A vehicle turning into his ranch. Daniel stepped to the window. A sleek black horse trailer rolled onto his property, pulled by a luxury truck with no plates on the front. His pulse kicked hard. Whoever was inside, they weren't Rachel. They weren't the sheriff, and they weren't coming to ask nicely. The black truck rolled slowly down Daniel's dirt driveway, the oversized tires pressing deep into the dry soil, leaving tracks that twisted his stomach into knots. Sunlight bounced off the polished hood, blinding for a second, and then he saw the license plate holder. Empty, not missing, removed. The horse trailer behind it, a high-end model used for competitive jumpers, spotless and gleaming, made a soft metallic clicking sound each time it hit a bump. Daniel's hand instinctively dropped to the pocket where he kept his phone. Not to call the sheriff. Not yet. He needed to know what he was dealing with first. The truck stopped 20 yards from his barn. Engine idling. No door opening. Just silence. Then finally the driver's door creaked open. A man stepped out. Tall. Mid-30s. Fit. Wearing a crisp blue shirt tucked into expensive jeans. Boots too shiny to have ever touched a cattle pasture. Sunglasses hiding his eyes. Everything about him was calculated, groomed, controlled. He walked toward Daniel with a slow confidence that suggested one thing clearly. He expected to be obeyed. "Morning," the man said. Daniel didn't move. "Can I help you?" The man's smile was polite. Polite in the way a wolf bares its teeth before taking a bite. "I'm here to pick up a mare that was delivered here by mistake." Daniel said nothing. The man continued. "Her name is Esmeralda. She belongs to one of our clients. We'd like to take her back quietly so we don't trouble you any further." Daniel crossed his arms. "Funny. That what this is? A courtesy visit?" The man's smile tightened just a fraction. "Something like that." Daniel nodded once toward the trailer. "Who's your client?" "I'm not at liberty to say. That seems to be a theme this week." A flicker of annoyance crossed the man's face, though he smoothed it quickly. "Look, Mr. Harper," the man said, "you're a busy rancher. You don't need this kind of problem. We'll take the mare and you can get back to your life." "I'll get back to my life either way," Daniel replied. "Question is whether I'm handing over a horse to the person she's running from." The man's jaw ticked once. Barely noticeable, but Daniel noticed. The man adjusted his sunglasses. "You're making assumptions, and you ain't making me comfortable enough to change 'em." A long moment passed. Dust lifted lazily between them in the afternoon heat. Then the man's tone shifted, dropped lower, sharper. "Mr. Harper, I'm not leaving without that mare." Daniel's voice stayed steady. "You might." The man took one step forward, closing the gap between them. "You don't understand the situation you're in," he said. "There are people very invested in this animal. People who don't want complications. People who—" Daniel cut him off. "I met one of your people already. Black SUV. Private investigator named Marcus." Something flickered in the man's posture, tension tightening across his shoulders, but he recovered quickly. "Marcus is supposed to observe," he said carefully, "not interfere. Yet here you are interfering." The man's smile vanished. "Where is the mare?" he asked. "Safe. You can't keep her. She seems to think otherwise." The man let out a slow breath and tilted his head. "Mr. Harper, I don't want this to get messy." "Well," Daniel said, "then maybe stop making a mess." So when, without warning, the man walked past Daniel toward the barn. Daniel moved instantly, stepping in front of him. "You don't step foot in my barn," Daniel said quietly. "Not without me saying so." The man's voice was ice. "Move." Daniel didn't, and for the first time the man dropped all pretense. "Mr. Harper," he said, voice flat, authoritative and dangerous, "I am under instruction to retrieve that horse. If you interfere, I will escalate this. Do you understand?" Daniel's pulse thudded, but he didn't flinch. "You do what you gotta do," he said, "and I'll do the same." A long silence followed. Finally the man stepped back. Not in retreat, more like recalculating. He glanced toward the barn once more, then back at Daniel. "You're in over your head," he said. "We'll be in touch." He turned, walked back to the truck, climbed inside, and pulled the rig into a slow, deliberate turn, like he wanted Daniel to know he wasn't retreating, just choosing a different angle. As the truck reached the main road, the man rolled down his window and called out without looking back, "Tell your vet to stop asking questions, it's not safe for her either." Daniel's chest tightened. Rachel. They'd already noticed her involvement. The trailer disappeared down the road, leaving nothing behind except tire marks and a tension thick enough to taste. Daniel walked straight into the barn, boots echoing across the concrete aisle. Essie lifted her head the moment she saw him. Her ears flicked forward. Her breathing quickened, not from fear of him, but from sensing his anger. She stepped toward the stall door, pressing her head lightly against the bars. Daniel rested his hand on her cheek. "You got more enemies than I expected, girl," he whispered. "But you got me now." Essie closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, and in that quiet moment, surrounded by dust and hay and the warm smell of horses, Daniel felt something shift inside him. Protectiveness, depth, resolve. He wasn't just sheltering her anymore, he was standing between her and people willing to do anything to get her back. Sarisite. As Daniel locked the barn door, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced down. He answered immediately. "Rachel, you okay?" Her voice came through shaky. "Daniel, did someone come to your place?" Daniel stopped walking. "What happened?" There was a long pause on the line. Then Rachel inhaled sharply, trying to steady herself. "Someone just came to my clinic," she said quietly. "They asked about the mare, asked what injuries she had, asked whether I'd given you anything, and when I wouldn't answer, another shaky breath. They warned me to stay out of it." Daniel's grip tightened around the phone so hard his knuckles went white. "You're not hurt, are you?" "No, just rattled. I'm coming there." "No," Rachel said quickly. "Don't. It'll draw attention. But Daniel, whoever these people are, they're serious." Daniel looked back at the barn, at Essie, at the fading dust trail where the truck had been. "I know," he said. "And that's why I need to figure out exactly what she ran from." Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. "Be careful, okay?" Daniel nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "You too." He hung up. Then he turned back toward the barn. Inside the shadows, Essie stood perfectly still, watching him like she understood far more than she should. "Looks like neither of us is sleeping much tonight," Daniel murmured. He walked inside, locked the barn door from the inside and pulled a chair up beside her stall. Because one thing was now undeniable. Whatever story Essie carried on her back, it was dangerous enough to follow them both. The Texas sun finally dipped behind the far pasture, leaving the sky stained in deep indigo and fading streaks of orange. Daniel sat in the barn beside Essie's stall, the wooden chair creaking under him whenever he shifted his weight. The air smelled like dust and hay, and the faint, warm scent of horse. It should have been comforting, it usually was. But tonight, everything felt stretched tight, like the whole ranch was holding its breath. Essie shifted occasionally, her hooves brushing softly against the stall floor. Each time she moved, Daniel glanced toward the main door, listening. He'd locked the barn from the inside. He'd latched the windows. He'd turned off the overhead lights so only a soft glow from the tackroom lamp spilled into the aisle. Still, he didn't feel safe. Not truly. Not after what that man had said. Not after what had happened to Rachel. Daniel rubbed a hand across his face. He'd been pulled into other people's problems before. Ranch life did that to a man. Neighbor trouble, lost calves, family disputes. He'd stepped in where needed, walked away when necessary. But this was different. This wasn't a neighbor with a fence dispute. This was money, power, secrecy, people willing to stalk a vet clinic just for asking questions. And right in the middle of all of it, a mare who hadn't asked for any of this. Essie whickered softly, nudging the stall door with her nose. Daniel stood, walked over and rested a hand on her forehead. "You're safe here," he murmured. He wasn't sure if it was true, but saying it out loud steadied him. Essie exhaled through her nostrils, leaning into his touch. It was past 10 p.m. when Daniel heard it. Soft, slow, rhythmic, footsteps on gravel outside the barn. Not an animal, not the wind, a person. Daniel froze, hand hovering near the pitchfork leaning by the door. The barn was dark enough that anyone approaching wouldn't see him right away. The footsteps stopped near the sliding door. Daniel stepped silently across the aisle, keeping himself in the shadows. His heartbeat felt too loud in his ears. Then, a faint click, metal against metal, a hand testing the handle. Someone was trying to see if the barn was unlocked. Daniel gripped the pitchfork tighter, muscles tightening. Another attempt. Then another, harder this time. Essie shifted nervously in her stall, ears pinned. Daniel moved closer to the door. Whoever was outside hadn't tried the heavy latch yet, only the handle. The latch would tell them the truth. Someone was inside, and someone inside meant witnesses, resistance, interference. He took a slow breath and waited. A shadow passed beneath the gap under the door. Boots, big ones. They stood there for several seconds, listening. Daniel's chest tightened. Move on, he thought. Just move on. After a long moment, the footsteps finally retreated. Slow, measured, deliberate. They didn't run. They didn't hurry. They walked away like a man checking off a task. Daniel stayed still until the sound faded completely. Only then did he let out a quiet breath. When he got back inside the barn aisle, Essie was watching him with wide eyes, breathing quickly. Her entire body was trembling, like she'd sensed the danger long before he had. Daniel rested a hand on her neck. "I know," he whispered. "I know, girl." For the first time since the Mare had arrived, Daniel felt something heavy settle into his chest. He wasn't enough, not alone. This wasn't a problem he could fix with hard work or stubbornness. There were lines he couldn't cross without backup, without someone who had authority. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over the contact. He'd known Lane for years. A good man, straightforward, fair. Not the kind of sheriff who looked the other way when trouble came knocking. But calling Lane meant turning this into an official matter. It meant paperwork, interrogations, investigations. It meant Essie might be taken from him before he could find the truth. It meant losing control. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. His phone buzzed unexpectedly in his hand, startling him. A text message. Unknown number. It read, "We know you're awake." A second message came instantly. "Walk away from the horse. This is your only warning." Daniel's pulse hammered. He stared at the screen, the glow cutting through the darkness of the barn. Essie let out a soft, frightened sound. That did it. Daniel didn't think anymore, didn't hesitate. He hit call. The phone rang once, twice, then, "Sheriff Lane." "Lane," Daniel said, voice low and steady. "I need you out at my ranch, tonight." "Daniel, you okay?" "No." A pause. "What's going on?" Daniel looked at Essie, at the shadows stretching across the barn, at his trembling mare who'd already survived more than he knew. "It's about a horse," Daniel said, "and a group of people who want her back real bad." Sheriff Lane exhaled. "Sit tight. I'm on my way." Daniel hung up and locked the phone screen. Then he leaned his forehead against Essie's cheek and whispered, "Help's coming. Just hold on a little longer." And outside, far off down the dirt road, he saw a faint pair of headlights, coming toward the ranch, not away from it. Not one set, two. One belonged to Sheriff Lane. The other, Daniel didn't know. But he had a damn good feeling it wasn't friendly. The night outside the barn glowed faintly under the rising dust, lit only by the narrow beam of approaching headlights. Daniel stood beside Essie's stall, pulse deep in his throat, listening to every creak and whisper of the old building. Two vehicles, one he invited, one he damn sure didn't. The first pair of lights approached with caution, bouncing calmly over the dirt road, the familiar pace of someone who knew the land and respected it. Sheriff Lane. Daniel recognized the sound of that truck before it even rounded the bend. The second pair of lights was different, tighter, lower, moving with purpose, not hesitation. Whoever was in that vehicle wasn't coming for conversation. Daniel backed up just enough to peek through the narrow window slats. He watched both vehicles slow at his front gate. Sheriff Lane rolled through first. The second vehicle followed, a dark SUV, newer, cleaner, tinted to the edge of legality. Lane pulled up near the house. The SUV stayed farther back, engine still running. Daniel muttered under his breath, "That ain't normal." Behind him, Essie shifted anxiously, her hooves tapping soft, uneven rhythms into the stall floor. She sensed the tension as clearly as he did. "Easy, girl," Daniel whispered. "Stay with me." He stepped out of the barn, leaving the door cracked, wide enough for him to see inside, narrow enough to shield Essie. The sheriff was already out of his truck. Lane was in his early 50s, tall with a slow, steady way of scanning a scene, the kind of sheriff who didn't waste movement or words. "Evening, Daniel," Lane said, stepping forward. His hand hovered near the holster, not touching it, but close. "Lane," Daniel said, "thanks for coming." "I could hear something in your voice," Lane replied. "Didn't like it. What's going on?" Before Daniel could answer, the SUV door opened. Marcus Lane, the private investigator, stepped out. Except this time he wasn't alone. Another man emerged from the passenger side, older, sharp-featured, wearing a perfectly pressed shirt, expensive boots, and a stare cold enough to freeze running water. Daniel didn't need an introduction. He knew who it was. Even if the man had never been named, even if no article had shown his photo, even if all he had were the tension in Essie's body and the warning scribbled on the hidden note, Daniel knew. Caleb Windsor. Sheriff Lane read Daniel's expression instantly and took a half-step closer, positioning himself slightly between Daniel and the two men. "Evening, Sheriff," Marcus called out smoothly. "This ain't your jurisdiction," Sheriff Lane replied without blinking. Marcus smiled politely. "Just here to resolve a misunderstanding." Caleb Windsor stepped forward with the confidence of a man who had never once heard the word no and taken it seriously. "Mr. Harper," Caleb said, "you have something that belongs to me." Daniel didn't respond. Caleb's smile sharpened, arrogant, assured. "That mare is my property," Caleb continued. "She was taken without authorization, and I'm here to collect her." "Taken?" Daniel repeated, tone low and edged. "She came to my ranch traumatized, cut up and scared out of her mind." Caleb didn't flinch, not even a twitch. "She's a valuable animal," he said, "often spirited. She panicked during transport, nothing more." Daniel stepped forward. "That ain't panic," he said. "That's fear. Fear of someone who made her run in the first place." Marcus stepped between them slightly. "Mr. Windsor isn't here to argue." Sheriff Lane stood straighter. "Mr. Windsor," he said evenly, "you have proof of ownership." Caleb nodded to Marcus, who produced a thick envelope, brand new papers, glossy, crisp, too perfect to have seen a day of use. Daniel's stomach turned. This smelled wrong, too clean, too fast. Lane took the papers, scanning them. While he did, Caleb glanced at Daniel. "You're in over your head," Caleb said softly. "Let us take her, and this ends quietly." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Quiet for who? Not for the horse." Caleb's lips curved faintly. "Horses don't get opinions." Daniel stepped forward instinctively, but Sheriff Lane extended an arm lightly, stopping him. Lane spoke calmly. "Mr. Windsor, I'm going to need to verify these documents. Until then, nobody's taken anything off this property." Caleb's expression darkened. "Sheriff," he said, voice low but steady, "I don't think you understand the gravity of—" "I understand the law," Lane said, "and the law's what we're following tonight." Silence rolled through the ranch, a hot, pressing silence filled with tension that felt ready to ignite like dry grass in July heat. Marcus leaned toward Caleb and whispered something. Caleb's jaw flexed. Then Caleb looked up and said, "Fine, we'll wait." He crossed his arms and leaned against the SUV like he was settling in for a long game. Sheriff Lane turned to Daniel quietly. "You armed?" "No." "Stay close to me then." Daniel nodded. Cassie let out a soft, distressed nicker from inside the barn. Caleb's eyes flicked toward the sound, sharp, predatory, and Daniel felt anger burn through him like a lit fuse. Sheriff Lane noticed. "Daniel," Lane said under his breath, "don't take the bait." But Caleb already was baiting him. "Beautiful mare, isn't she?" Caleb said calmly. "Temperamental but talented. A horse like that performs best under firm handling." Daniel clenched his fists so hard his knuckles whitened. Lane gave Caleb a warning look. "That's enough." But Caleb wasn't done. "She belongs with professionals," Caleb said, "not a rancher who doesn't understand what she's bred for." Daniel took one step forward, and Lane shifted in front of him again. Then, suddenly, a loud metallic clang exploded from inside the barn. Essie, in distress. Daniel spun toward the door. Essie's hooves struck the stall. She was frantic, slamming her weight into the walls, terrified by the voices outside. One voice in particular, Caleb's. Sheriff Lane raised his voice. "Everybody stay right here." He moved toward the barn with Daniel at his side, but behind them Marcus whispered, "We shouldn't wait any longer." And Caleb replied, just loud enough for Daniel to hear, "She won't calm down until she's back with me." Daniel stopped cold. Back with him. The phrase wasn't possessive. It wasn't troubled. It wasn't concerned. It was ownership, pure and dangerous. Daniel turned slowly, meeting Caleb's eyes fully, and Caleb smiled. A thin, cold, victorious smile. Daniel's blood turned to iron, because in that one expression he understood the truth. Essie wasn't afraid of the world. She wasn't afraid of transport. She wasn't afraid of barns or strangers. She was afraid of him, the him from the note, the him she had run from, the him someone risked everything to warn about. Caleb Windsor. Essie's hooves struck the stall again, a sharp, desperate crack of wood under stress. Daniel and Sheriff Lane rushed into the barn, the heavy door sliding shut behind them. The second the door closed, Essie's panic softened. Not vanished, but quieter. Daniel stepped toward her stall, whispering low, steady words the way he'd always calmed spooked cattle. "It's okay, girl. I'm here. Easy now. Easy." Essie's sides heaved, her breath hot and fast. Her ears flicked back toward the barn entrance, toward Caleb's voice, even muffled by distance. She recognized him, and she feared him. Sheriff Lane watched silently, absorbing the moment with the sharp, trained scrutiny of someone who refused to jump to conclusions, but also refused to ignore what stood right in front of him. Lane's voice was low. "Daniel, this ain't normal behavior around a past owner." "No," Daniel said, eyes never leaving Essie. "It ain't." Lane rubbed his chin. "Cuts on her legs, panic around that man, hidden note, folks threatening a vet, private investigators, that fancy trailer with no plates." He shook his head slowly. "Something's rotten here." Essie reached her muzzle through the bars toward Daniel, nudging his arm with urgent desperation, like she needed him anchored near her. Daniel placed a hand on her cheek. "I know," he whispered. "I know." Lane took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Daniel, I need to see that note." Daniel hesitated for a half-second, then nodded. He pulled the folded scrap from his pocket and handed it over. Lane moved beneath the dim light, unfolding it carefully. His eyes scanned the words. "Do not trust him." The sheriff's jaw tightened as if the words physically caught on his teeth. "You find anything else?" Lane asked. Daniel reached into his shirt pocket again and handed him the metal capsule. Lane turned it over thoughtfully. "Custom made, not cheap." "Why hide a note on a tack piece instead of handing it to the driver?" "Because whoever hid it didn't want to get caught," Daniel said. "And they wanted the first person who handled her to know she was in danger." Lane nodded slowly. "Looks that way." Another slam came from outside the barn. Not Essie this time. Boots. 3 pairs. Walking. Lane's eyes snapped toward the barn door. He moved to the side window, peeking through the small opening. "That's Caleb and his man," Lane muttered. "And, damn it." "What?" Lane's voice dropped to a tight whisper. "They're moving toward the barn." Daniel moved instinctively between the stall and the door. Sheriff Lane held up a hand. "Easy. You rush out there hot, you'll make this worse." "Closer they get," Daniel replied. "Worse it already is." Lane positioned himself at the barn door, cracking it open just enough to step outside, but not enough for anyone behind him to see Essie. Daniel stayed inside, right beside the mare. "Sa kuulisin fansein dikas." "Evening, gentlemen," Lane called out. "This barn is private property. You approach it again without permission, I'll arrest you for trespassing." Caleb's voice was smooth, too smooth. "Sheriff, with all due respect, you can't arrest me for trying to retrieve my own horse." "Until I confirm ownership," Lane said, "you don't have a damn right to step within 10 feet of that barn." Marcus's voice entered the mix, low and clinical. "This is unnecessary escalation." "No," Lane shot back. "This is me reminding you both how the law works in this county." Daniel could hear tension building with every syllable. He kept his hand on Essie's neck. She leaned into him, trembling. "What did he do to you?" Daniel whispered. Essie's ear flicked back, her breath hitching, as if she understood the tone, not the words. Sheriff Lane's voice suddenly changed, loud enough for Daniel to hear clearly. "You just said what?" A pause. "Say it again," Lane snapped. A longer pause. Quieter. Tense. Lane stormed back into the barn, jaw set hard. "What happened?" Daniel asked. Lane exhaled sharply. "I just got a threat," Lane said. "From Caleb's man. Not even subtle. Said if I interfere with the retrieval, I'll regret it professionally." Daniel's stomach turned. "He threatened a sheriff?" Daniel asked. Lane nodded grimly. "And I recorded the whole damn thing." He tapped his chest pocket, body mic on, always. "That's leverage," Lane said. "Real leverage. And now we play this careful." Essie nickered softly again, the anxiety still rolling off her. Lane paced once, then stopped and looked directly at Daniel. "Tell me everything," Lane said. Daniel hesitated. There was a lot he hadn't said yet, not because he was hiding anything, but because none of it had made sense until now. But he told Lane anyway, about the wrong delivery, the horse refusing to load back, the cuts, the dirt, the exhaustion, the note hidden under tack, the tire tracks in the night, markers showing up on the road, the man with the trailer and no plates, the threat to Rachel. Lane listened silently, face growing more serious with every detail. When Daniel finished, the sheriff spoke carefully. "You realize this ain't just about a horse, right?" Daniel nodded slowly. Lane took a breath. This feels like someone's trying real hard to hide something, and Essie's the key to whatever that something is. Daniel looked at Essie, sweat drying on her coat, eyes wide, flanks still trembling. I think she saw something she wasn't supposed to, Daniel said quietly. Lane nodded. Could be. Then, and if that's the case, they'll do a hell of a lot more than make threats to get her back. Essie stepped toward Daniel again, pressing her head against his chest, the first movement that wasn't born of fear. Sheriff, Daniel said, voice low. She chose me. Lane nodded once. And now you're responsible for her. The sheriff turned toward the door again. Stay in here, he said. Lock it behind me. I'm going to go keep them busy while I make a call. A call to who? Lane rested his hand on the door handle, then gave Daniel a steady look. To someone who outranks all of us. And with that, he stepped outside, shutting the barn door behind him. Daniel locked it, then knelt beside Essie, listening to her breathe, warm, shaky, alive. Whatever was coming next, he'd face it, with her. Sheriff Lane stepped out into the night, closing the barn door behind him with a solid, deliberate pull. Daniel listened through the wood, the muffled crunch of boots on gravel, the sharp exchange of voices outside. His pulse matched Essie's trembling breaths. He could feel her fear radiating like heat from her body. He placed a steady hand on her cheek. You're all right, he whispered. You ain't alone in this. Essie leaned into him, the gesture small, but filled with trust she shouldn't have had left. And Daniel knew, whatever this had become, he was in it, all the way. Sheriff Lane's voice cut through the air outside, clipped and controlled. I told you both, you step toward that barn again, and you're under arrest. Caleb's response was quieter, but Daniel could hear the smugness through the cracks in the door. You're overstepping, Sheriff. This isn't a criminal matter. Lane scoffed, a low grunt. You threatened me. That makes it my matter. Marcus spoke next, that same calm, practiced tone that grated on Daniel more with every word. We're prepared to handle this civilly. Let us retrieve the Mare, and there's no reason for law enforcement to be involved. You being here in the dead of night is reason enough, Lane snapped. Now back away from the barn. Silence followed. Not compliance. Calculation. Then Lane's voice again, quieter this time, but not soft. I'm making a call. Don't move. Footsteps retreated a few paces. Daniel recognized the shift. Lane was putting distance between himself and the two men, likely stepping toward his patrol truck. He heard the sheriff's radio crackle. Then Lane's voice dropped low, meant for the person on the other end, but still audible enough for Daniel to piece it together. This is Sheriff Lane, County 14. I need a consultation with Ranger Division. A pause. It's urgent. Another pause. Yes, ma'am. Related to an ongoing investigation. Daniel blinked. The Texas Rangers? That wasn't a small escalation. That was a signal flare. Something serious was unfolding. Something tied to Essie in ways Daniel hadn't yet understood. Lane continued, voice low and controlled. I've got a high-value horse delivered to the wrong ranch under suspicious circumstances. Injuries consistent with abuse. Owner present. Accompanied by a private investigator. They've already issued threats. Another pause. Yes. Recorded. More silence as the response came through. Yes, ma'am, I'll keep them here, waiting for your call. Then Lane ended the transmission. Daniel felt his chest tighten. This wasn't just local trouble. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a custody dispute or misfiled paperwork. This was big, big enough for the Rangers. Essie nickered softly, sensing his tension. Easy, Daniel murmured. Help's on the way. Safakuris. Daniel sat on the stool beside Essie's stall, staring at the floorboards, while outside the voices continued. A low, hostile rumble. His mind turned over everything that had happened. Not the threats, not the men, not even the note. But Essie, her behavior didn't fit an accidental situation. She had fled transport, run long distances, refused to load, trembled at Caleb's voice, reacted violently when he approached the barn, chosen Daniel as her only place of safety. That wasn't panic. That was trauma. And trauma meant one thing. She'd lived through something, seen something, survived something. And Daniel knew horses well enough to understand one truth. They don't lie with their bodies. Essie's body screamed one thing. Danger. Daniel brushed a hand over his mouth. What happened to you, girl? Essie lowered her muzzle into his shoulder, breathing shaky but slower now. He rested a hand on her neck, grounding her, and grounding himself. Outside, Sheriff Lane's footsteps approached again. A shadow passed the barn's small window. Then Lane knocked in 2 short raps. "It's me." Daniel unlocked the door. Lane stepped inside, shutting it quickly behind him. The sheriff exhaled hard. "They're not backing off," he said. "Not even with a ranger callback." "They know time ain't on their side?" Daniel's eyebrows lowered. "What does that tell you?" Lane met his eyes. "That they don't just want that mare. They need her." Essie stomped in her stall, ears pinned. Lane glanced at her, then back to Daniel. "That mare knows something," the sheriff said quietly, "and whatever she knows and someone wants it buried." Daniel nodded slowly, jaw tight. "I figured." Lane ran a hand over the back of his neck. "Have you ever heard of Caleb Windsor before this?" "Only what I found online," Daniel said. "Allegations of abuse dismissed, apparently." Lane snorted. "Dismissed doesn't mean untrue." Daniel swallowed hard. "What now?" Lane checked his phone. "Rangers'll call back any minute. Until then, keep her calm, keep her close. They don't make a move unless I'm in their way." Daniel's pulse hammered. "And if they try?" Lane's voice hardened. "Then they'll regret it." The sheriff's phone buzzed. Lane lifted it. "Ma'am, I'm here." A pause. Lane's eyebrows rose slightly. "Yes, I can keep them separated. Yes, the barn is secure." Another pause. "I agree. It's not normal transport behavior." Another. "Understood." Lane ended the call, slowly, deliberately. Then he looked at Daniel. "They're sending someone," Lane said. "Not tonight, but first thing in the morning. They want the mare protected until then." Daniel nodded. "Protected how?" Lane's jaw tightened. "I'm staying here." Daniel didn't argue. Lane continued. "And we keep her inside until daylight. No exceptions." Another muffled voice sounded outside. Caleb's. Louder now, impatient. Lane leaned close to Daniel, lowering his voice. "They're getting frustrated. That's when people make mistakes." Daniel swallowed. "And we can't afford one." "No," Lane said. "We damn sure can't." Essie shifted again, pressing herself against the stall door as if trying to stay as near to Daniel as she could. Lane watched her, then spoke softly but firmly. "Daniel, you understand she picked you for a reason." Daniel nodded, his own voice low, rough. "I know." Lane rested a hand on his shoulder. "Then don't let her down." Daniel nodded again, slower this time. "I won't." Outside, Caleb's voice rose. "Sheriff, we're done waiting." Lane didn't move. Inside the barn, a single truth settled over them both. Morning would bring answers, but the night might bring something else entirely. By the time the first faint blue of dawn touched the Texas horizon, Daniel had barely moved from the chair beside Essie's stall. His body ached, his eyes burned. But he wasn't leaving her, not with Caleb Windsor pacing outside like a predator waiting for darkness to slip back in his favor. Essie slept only in short bursts, her ears flicking at the slightest noise. Each time she jolted awake, Daniel would lay a hand on her neck, grounding her until her breathing steadied again. Outside the barn, Sheriff Lane had spent the night in his patrol truck. Engine off, door cracked just enough to hear, but not enough to invite conversation. He had watched Caleb and Marcus do the same. Neither of them left. Not for food, not for sleep, not for anything. They wanted the mare desperately, too desperately. And now morning was coming, and with it, the Rangers. Daniel stood as Essie shifted again, stretching her neck over the stall door. "You're almost clear," he whispered. "Just hold on, girl." He stepped quietly toward the barn entrance, lifting the latch just enough to look out through a narrow crack. Lane's truck sat 20 yards ahead. Caleb's SUV was parked beside it. Marcus leaned against the front bumper, arms crossed, watching the barn like a hawk studying its prey. The sunrise painted everything in soft orange, but it didn't soften the tension. Lane spotted Daniel and approached. "You holding up?" the sheriff asked. "Barely," Daniel admitted. "She's worse when she hears him." Lane nodded slowly. "I noticed. Horses don't fake that." "No," Daniel said. "They don't." Lane glanced back toward Caleb. Rangers texted. "They're 15 minutes out." Daniel exhaled. Relief wasn't the right word, but something close brushed his ribs. "Once they get here," Lane said, "we'll let 'em sort this out." Daniel nodded. "And until then?" Lane shifted his jaw. "We wait." The 15 minutes stretched into 20. Then, distant dust on the main road. Not a truck. Two, one marked, one unmarked. Lane straightened. "That's them." And that same moment, Caleb stepped out of his SUV, posture shifting like a man who'd been waiting for reinforcements. He walked forward, Marcus at his shoulder. Daniel stepped out of the barn fully now, placing himself between the men and Essie. Caleb's eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, or anger? Maybe both. You dragged law enforcement into this, Caleb said, voice low, tight, nearly trembling with contained rage. Daniel didn't respond. Caleb took another step. You have no idea the trouble you've caused. Lane placed a hand on his holster. That's close enough. Caleb stopped. The Rangers' trucks rolled to a slow stop. The first person out was a woman in her 40s, tall, composed, wearing the crisp tan uniform of a Texas Ranger. Her nameplate read, Lieutenant Maria Sandoval, and instantly the air changed. Caleb stiffened. Marcus straightened. Lane stepped respectfully aside. Sandoval surveyed the scene with quiet surgical precision. The barn, the vehicles, the men, Daniel's stance, Caleb's tension, Marcus's watchfulness. Sheriff Lane, she greeted. Lieutenant. She looked at Daniel. Mr. Harper? Yes, ma'am. Then at Caleb. Mr. Windsor. Caleb nodded stiffly. Thank you for coming, Lieutenant. We have a straightforward matter. We'll decide how straightforward it is. Sandoval cut in. Marcus inhaled sharply, but stayed silent. Sandoval turned to Lane. Walk me through everything. Lane did. Calm, precise. From the wrong delivery, to the threats, to the recorded comment. When he finished, Sandoval asked, The Mare is inside? Daniel nodded. She's shaken, but she's okay. Sandoval studied him. May I see her? Daniel opened the barn door. Essie immediately stepped back, startled by the sudden crowd outside. But when Daniel placed a hand on her cheek, she steadied almost instantly. Sandoval noticed. Her eyes narrowed slightly, thoughtful. She reacts to him? Sandoval asked, jerking her chin backward toward Caleb. Daniel nodded. Show me. Daniel stepped out of the stall and moved just enough so Essie could see Caleb standing several yards away. The transformation was instant. Essie's ears pinned. Her muscles tightened. She backed into the stall wall, trembling violently. Sandoval lifted a hand. That's enough. Move him back. Lane stepped forward. Windsor, back up. Caleb hesitated, then stepped away, though bitterness twisted his jaw. Essie calmed the moment he left her line of sight. Sandoval looked at Daniel, then Lane, then back at Caleb. That is not normal, she said. Caleb finally snapped. She's a sensitive mare. Warmbloods are dramatic. She's traumatized, Daniel said bluntly. There's a difference. Sandoval raised a hand to keep them from shouting over each other. Mr. Windsor, she said, your ownership claims will be reviewed, but until I'm satisfied this animal is not being reclaimed into a harmful environment, she is not leaving this ranch. Caleb's face flushed. You can't do that, he said. Sandoval stared at him with a calmness that could crack stone. I just did. Marcus stepped forward. Lieutenant, with respect. No, she cut him off. You don't get to talk yet. Marcus swallowed the words. Then Sandoval turned to Daniel. We'll place the mare under protective custody. Daniel's chest tightened. Meaning? She stays here, Sandoval said. Under my authority. Sheriff Lane will maintain site control. I'll be taking the evidence, the note, capsule, and all relevant photos. Daniel nodded slowly. Relief, fear, and exhaustion crashed together all at once. And Mr. Windsor, Sandoval's voice sharpened, you're not to step within 100 yards of this property until we finish the investigation. Your threats to a county sheriff are already documented. Caleb's jaw tightened so hard Daniel thought he might shatter a tooth. This isn't over, Caleb said, pointing at Daniel. You don't know the damage you've... Caleb, Marcus hissed softly. Enough. Caleb glared at Daniel one last time, then turned sharply and walked to the SUV. Sandoval stepped forward, blocking his path. One more thing, she said. Your trailer has no plates. That's a violation. We'll address that as well. For the first time, Caleb's confidence cracked completely. Marcus nudged him toward the vehicle, and they left without another word. Dust rose behind them as they sped down the road, farther and farther away. Est-ce que passe ici? The ranch fell quiet again. Dawn had fully broken now, warm gold soaking the barn, the fields, the fences. Sandoval approached Daniel. We'll need statements, she said. Evidence, access to the mare's injuries, all of it. You'll get whatever you need, Daniel replied. Then Sandoval looked into Essie's stall. The mare stood close, calmer now than she had been in days. She trusts you, Sandoval said. Daniel nodded. I don't know why. I'm just the man she landed on. Sometimes, Sandoval said, that's exactly the man a horse needs. Lane stepped beside them. Rangers'll sort this out, Daniel, but you did right. You kept her safe. Daniel rested a hand against Essie's neck. Yeah, he said quietly, and I'll keep doing that. Essie breathed softly, pressing into him. For the first time since she arrived, her body wasn't tense. Her eyes weren't wild. She looked safe. Daniel closed his eyes. Whatever had been chasing her, whatever she had endured, whatever danger still lingered outside the barn, here, with him, she had a place to stand, and he wasn't letting her go. Not now, not ever.